Ouija board madness. So my story is to show a real-life example of why God puts boundaries in place for believers as a means of protection from all that is unseen. I just turned 30. I'm a wife and a mom to 2 wonderful boys. I live in Minnesota, born and raised in a small town where there wasn't much going on Friday nights, besides football or basketball games and lots of underage drinking. This is very common in small towns out of boredom, I think, and being quite of a distance from other activities that larger towns might offer young people. My mom and dad were strong in their faith and never wavered. They were committed to God and our family fiercely. They warned me never to try a Ouija board, told me that it wasn't a joke, but could have serious consequences. Growing up, I had quite a wild streak, and I suppose I had to learn some things the hard way in order to know the depth of God's mercy. I am totally 100% sold out for Jesus right now, doing my best to walk in a way that glorifies Him, but there was a period when I was living according to the flesh, as the Apostle Paul would say. Anyway, this happened the year I turned 16, so that makes it 14 years ago. It was Halloween night, and I found myself at the home of one of my newer friends. I'm not sure who actually brought the Ouija board along, but later in the evening we went upstairs to her room to hang out. Most of the group stared wide-eyed at the board and was afraid to use it. But there was a group of about 4 of us that did. And for context, the original papers published in the state of Maryland, where the first Ouija board was used, described the Ouija board as a way to communicate with the dead. But what people need to understand is that you are actually communicating with demons that are capable of deception at the highest levels. When we started, we all placed our fingers in the center of the board and said, "Hello." We asked the typical questions. Is anyone here with us today? Is there anything you wish to tell us on Halloween night? Things like that. We had read somewhere on the internet that if whatever spirit that is contacting you shuffles through the letters on the board very quickly or spells out things that make little sense, then it might be a spirit that does not really wish to be, quote, bothered, unquote. So you should end the session and put the board away. That is exactly what happened. I remember rolling my eyes at my friend sitting next to me that had been too hesitant to take part. See? It's made by the same people who make the game Monopoly. It's not real. As we were getting ready to call it quits, thinking nothing would happen, something did actually happen. To this day, I actually can't believe what my eyes saw. The person across the circle from me started speaking in a different voice altogether. His eyes started shifting back and forth so fast, and then rolled in the back of his head altogether. It almost looked like he was having a seizure. His body started shaking back and forth. Another boy that was good friends with him began to take action and tried to wake him up from this trance or whatever was happening. He kept slapping his face and shouting, "Wake up, it's you, it's still you, come back." The boy that was in a trance-like state then ran out of the room and fell down an entire flight of stairs because his body had gone totally limp. Thank goodness the stairs were carpeted and nothing sharp was at the bottom, or I think he could have been seriously hurt. After that, someone poured a cold cup of water over his face and he gasped and came to. He was so completely confused about why we were all standing over him like this and shouting at him. To say he was scared is a total understatement. He had absolutely no memory of what had just happened. After this, another girl said, "No more. We're putting this away and never touching this again," and we all agreed. We then went on to the couch, turned on the TV, all of us too shook up to try to even drive home, so we turned on a movie to try to find some normalcy after those events. Except, it didn't stop there. These were the days of landlines and home phones before people had a smartphone or anything like that. I was sitting right next to the side table where a cordless phone was plugged in. About 5 minutes into the movie, the phone started ringing again and again. It happened on a loop, over and over. Someone told me to answer it and ask it to stop, and there was nothing but silence on the other line. I didn't recognize the number, and it said unknown caller on the caller ID. And one thing I found striking was that the last 3 digits of the number listed had the number 666. It was that very moment that I wished I had taken my parents' advice. After this happened, one other crazy and inexplicable thing happened. There was a glass decorative ball that was in kind of a holder on the mantle of the fireplace. I don't know the actual purpose of it, but this family was pretty wealthy and had lots of glass and ornamental decorative things around the house. After the phone stopped ringing, we thought everything was over. And all of a sudden, the glass ball on the mantle flew out of the holder, which would have taken a lot of effort. Nobody was anywhere near it as we were sitting on the couch across the room. The ball smashed into the wall and pieces of glass were sent all over the floor in front of us. At that moment, I said, "All right, that's it. I'm going home. I do not want to be here anymore." I got my keys and my bag together. I was visibly shaking, and I asked my friend to follow me home as I drove back to town because I was afraid something would happen to me while driving. He was kind enough to follow me back to my house. My parents were the strict kind and usually waited up to see if I was home by curfew, and I always had to do a smell test to see if I'd been drinking, etc. They were old school. Anyway, I made it home by curfew, and they were already upstairs asleep in bed. My room was downstairs, which meant I would be all alone on the main floor all night because my brother had just moved away to college. I was so shaken by everything that had happened, and I grabbed a pillow and blanket and legitimately slept on my parents' bedroom floor like I did when I was young. When my dad tripped over me in the middle of the night and asked me what in the world I was doing, I just said we watched a really scary movie and I didn't want to sleep by myself downstairs. And I never really talked about that night again. But if people joke about spirits or Ouija boards in my presence, I will always make sure to set the record straight. I also knew someone in high school that crafted his own Ouija board out of a pizza box as a joke one night. He grew up going to Catholic school and church, but didn't share any kind of faith, so he figured he had nothing to lose. After his session that involved some other kids from our class, he later drove home and found his cat lying dead on his front steps with blood coming out of its mouth. He always thought it was just a coincidence and then another larger animal had killed it. But I always thought it was connected, especially after my experience with using the Ouija board. All of this is not to glorify it or make light of it, but to show people that the spiritual world is real and we are called to flee from evil, not to mix with it. I've had to ask forgiveness for my part in this.